What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports. Guys, today we got Cody Como from Combat Sports HQ. Cody, welcome, man.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to it. I watch you guys' content, and you guys do an awesome job.
Thanks. Likewise with your audio stuff. You guys are killing it. And for those of you guys that don't know, Cody's kind of an icon in the Houston MMA world, and that's where Nick, my brother, and I are based out of. So it's always good to have a fellow Houstonian on the show. So welcome, man. And yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. UFC 287 preview is kind of the basis of the conversation today, man. But there's been some really good fights this year, but 287 might be one of the best cards, especially with that rematch. That's a dangerous rematch for Adesanya.
Yeah, man. I don't even know. I started thinking about that, and I just see fireworks in my head. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, right? They always say styles make fights, and that is very true. But then there's the psychological aspect of it as well, where you have somebody who you just can't seem to beat. No matter how much you outstrike them, how much sharper you are, they always seem to find a way to get their hand raised. And it's a lot of it has to do with Alex's extreme power. And, he just has a way of finding that left hook that just puts people to sleep. And I think a lot of it is, when I talk about the psychological aspect, is the last kickboxing match that they had before both of them kind of made their transition to MMA. Izzy before Alex. Izzy actually left the arena with an oxygen mask on. And, that's got to do something to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could only imagine if it was myself. I mean, there's even just the sparring that I do, man. Like sometimes my buddy he'll get the best of me, and I'm just like, do I really want to do this again? So I can't imagine an actual competitive fight where you get knocked out like that, where you have to have an oxygen mask for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of an aspect of this that you and I bring is, I train recreationally. I started training too late in life to try to make a career out of it, but I've been in there. I've had my fair share of sparring sessions. I've been hurt in sparring matches. So it kind of adds that element of realness to it. Like, hey, it's not just as simple as this guy went off and became a complete MMA fighter in the sense of Izzy and all of that's wiped clean and he's going to go in there and just dust Alex up, because there really is an aspect of that when that cage door locks and you're looking in the eyes of somebody who's put you to sleep, it's got to mess with you. And Izzy, you could tell in that first MMA fight that just happened, the one where he lost his belt, it was almost the sense of he was trying to be perfect, but also trying to avoid that power at all costs. And one of the problems when you try to avoid the power, or there's certain things you're trying to be hesitant on, that's kind of when you end up getting caught. And it seemed like he got in that fifth round locked against the side of the cage there, and he couldn't escape either way. And Alex was able to land that power that he does so famously. So I'm really excited about this next fight. And I just don't know where Izzy goes from here if he were to lose this fight again, because now that would be 4 in a row to Pereira. He's clearly the top dog at 185. And for somebody who's just like a future Hall of Famer in Adesanya, I don't think he's going to be satisfied just being a gatekeeper at 185. So what do you think he'll do if he does, in fact, lose again?
I think he goes up to light heavyweight. Maybe he stays at 185 just because people, yeah, I know they've had 4 fights, but this will only really be the second one in an MMA fight. I know it seems crazy, but it's just not the same. We did see some subpar grappling from the two of them whenever they did do some grappling exchanges. But, ultimately, I think that I don't think Adesanya looked bad at light heavyweight. I just don't think he took the time to appropriately gain the weight. I think that he's got the length, he's got the athleticism. If he puts on 15, 20 pounds the right way, almost like John Jones did going up to heavyweight, I think he takes that division easily. The problem there is so can Pereira.
Well, that's just the thing, right? Because he's such a big guy that everybody's kind of Glover was the guy at 205 there for a short period of time. And now Jamal Hill obviously was able to finish him. And so Alex definitely wants to get his crack at the guy who beat up his mentor. Now Jamal and Yuri have to settle some business, but that's why I see it being kind of tough for Izzy, because if he loses, yes, he could put on the size and run up to 205 and take on Alex, take on the champion there, whoever it may be at the time. But Alex is also looking to make that move up. So he's almost like the boogeyman that he can't escape. Do you have a prediction for this fight? Do you think Izzy can come back and get his hand raised? And what do you think he needs to do in order for that to happen?
Stay out the cage, 100%. He needs to stay off the cage. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs to look to put Pereira away early. He almost did it in the last fight. If that fight was 3 seconds longer, he sleeps Pereira. Fight's over. I think that the longer this fight goes, obviously I do favor Izzy by decision. I don't see Pereira winning a decision in this fight. I mean, that would probably be the highest odds ever if somebody's gonna put down money on that. I just don't see Pereira is not a good point fighter. But the longer this fight goes, maybe that's better for Izzy actually, because he probably will win this fight by decision. But if not, he's got to put this guy to sleep. And I think if he puts him to sleep, I think we're going to see a new level of confidence from the former champ.
Yeah, no doubt. Alex is kind of like Cheeto Vera in a way, you know, a better, more improved version of Vera, because he's very content allowing his opponent to throw double the amount of strikes that he throws, because he knows his power is so devastating. And I guess the difference really between him and Cheeto is that he competes at a weight class where if you land the right shot, it's lights out. Whereas at 135, you certainly can knock people out, and there's been some great finishes there. But generally, it takes a little bit more accumulation than just that one shot. But Alex has got that luxury of just landing that left hand on the right spot. And that's all she wrote. And, you know, I do think I'm going to pick Alex to win this fight, because I think that I don't think he's getting any worse at MMA. He's so new to MMA that he can only get better and make incremental gains each fight. So his grappling, as you pointed out, was not great because he was a kickboxer, and still that's his foundation. But Glover Teixeira is one of the best grapplers that 205's had in a while, and that's his mentor. And so he's in there every day working with Glover, getting better. You know, and I just think that's going to play a factor. And I don't think there's been enough time for Izzy to really go back to the drawing board, correct the mistakes, and come back. And I think there has been just enough time for Alex to improve just ever so slightly in his grappling that Izzy's not going to be able to take him down again. And man, some of this sparring footage from Alex has looked really good. He's in there sparring Chinese heavyweight boxers that are 285 pounds and 6'7". And he seems to be firing on all levels. And I think confidence might be the name of the game in this one, because he seems to be extremely confident in what he's putting together right now. And so for that reason, I do think I'm going to take Alex to win again.
Man, that's not a bad pick. I don't think there is a bad pick here. I think Alex is going to win. I think if Alex does win, it's by knockout. The longer the fight goes, the more it favors Adesanya. I think my pick here is, man, I don't know if I want to pick against Alex. My gut's telling me Izzy's going to get this one back. I don't know how. I think by decision would be the answer, but I think Izzy might do it by TKO this time.
Yeah, that would really be something. And you talk about the confidence that he would gain from that. That would be just. And he said, look, I don't care if it's in the parking lot of the arena. I don't care if it's in a gym with no cameras rolling. Like, I don't care if there's not a belt on the line. I just need to beat Alex. Like, I've been the champ. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt many times over. That's not important to me. What's important to me is beating this damn guy who's followed me around the world, beating me up everywhere I go. And, so there's like an added motivation there. But I can't wait for the fight. I think, breaking it down, Izzy does have to be perfect. He has to avoid getting his back against the cage, as you said. I do think he needs to mix in some grappling, even if it's just the fakes of the grappling, as we saw with Justin Gaethje when he just beat Rafael Fiziev. He didn't necessarily wrestle, as everybody, complains that Justin Gaethje never wrestles, but he's got this great wrestling pedigree. But I think that he did enough as far as the wrestling goes to fake the takedowns and ultimately make Fiziev think, and that was what allowed him to land some of those overhands. So if Izzy can mix in a little bit of that, just the element of surprise, like fake a takedown here or there, or actually shoot for a single or double, it might make Alex think and drop his hands to defend the takedown, and that's where he might find some of those big shots over the top, maybe some head kicks, maybe some overhands. But he's got to stay active, he's got to stay off the cage, and he's got to be he has to play this balance in my eyes, which is he's got to push forward and be aggressive, which is not normally his style, but he can't overdo it, because if he does, he's going to walk right into getting hit. So he's got to toe that line between not getting backed up to the cage, but also not being overly aggressive where he gets countered and put to sleep.
100%. He's just got to really, really do his thing. He's just gotta almost play that point fighting system, but aggressively. That's what he's got to do. And I think, he found a home for his right hand. You know, he's just such a good striker. I think it's there. He's just gotta figure it out. And you know, he might, or Alex is going to be that continue to be that boogeyman. That I mean, I think Sean Strickland said it best. I don't necessarily agree with like anything that he says, but he said that if you know if Pereira taps on you on the shoulder and you're at an ATM at night, you're probably not going home. So
Right.
that's literally kind of how I see it. So it is what it is.
And he of all people would know that. He felt that left
Yep.
hand.
I don't know. I still to this day do not know. I guess you can't change your whole style for one fight. I just still to this day I don't understand why he didn't put his hand up. You can't fight a guy like that. But that's
It's weird, yeah. Strickland fights in that like it's such a unique style of fighting for MMA because he fights out of like a Philly shell, like he's a boxer, and he kind of and he gets away with it a lot of the time because he's really good with his head movement and he's willing to take a shot. But when you're in there with somebody like Alex who just hits like a freight train and is also very tricky and setting traps and stuff like that, man, coming into range against Alex with your hands down is a tough proposition, and he definitely paid the price for that.
Absolutely. I mean, Alex is a killer. He is just a killer. One of the best strikers in the world. He showed that. He's not as good as Izzy when it comes to just striking though. And I mean, it showed. It showed. It's just like he's just got that much more power. I think that ultimately ends fights that Izzy's only shown a few times.
Yeah, he's like Deontay Wilder for MMA.
Yeah, really, really. Like Deontay Wilder is not a good boxer. By when you compare him to Fury, he's just it's not the same. Wilder, I mean, Wilder's just got. And when you win 48 fights by sheer power, yes, he's a good boxer. He's just not a good technical boxer. That's the terms I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, I think it's a fair point, and I would go as far as to say if Deontay Wilder was my size, somebody who's 150 pounds, you would not know his name. He would not be a top level boxer. He would not be a former world champion. He would just be a guy that boxes, and he's average professional at best. What makes Deontay so good is what made him win so many fights is the fact that he's so big and he's so powerful, and he delivers that power, and he can seem to find his shots regardless of how bad he's losing the fight or how technically imperfect he is.
Yep.
So I truly think the only reason Deontay Wilder is a household name is because he's a heavyweight. I think if he was a normal sized guy, he would be chewed up by a lot of the guys in the division, but that's just my opinion. Now, Alex, maybe not necessarily, because Alex is very technical too. He's just he's not quite as sharp as Izzy, but he's very technical, and he seems to be very content to wait for his shots, pick his shots, and know that he's going to land with extreme power when he does land, which it makes for an exciting style. But, another exciting matchup on the card is also the co-main event. We got Jorge Masvidal versus Gilbert Burns. This seems to me on paper a tough fight for Masvidal, but he's going to have the home crowd. I mean, Gilbert lives down in South Florida too, but Masvidal is known as Mr. Miami. I know him and Covington go back and forth as to who's the real king of Miami, and they'll settle that outside of a steakhouse if they have to. But yeah, I mean, that's a good fight. Tough fight to win for Jorge, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. I will say Jorge. So Jorge does really well with guys that can. His defensive wrestling is really good. He doesn't get submitted a lot. Jorge's been in there with every kind of fighter that you can imagine. He really is. I don't want to call him this. I think he's better than a journeyman. I think people call him a journeyman, but I don't necessarily think he's got that title. I think it's just, to me, it's okay. If he beats Gilbert, he probably gets a title shot. And I think he is a bad matchup for Leon, but he's got to get through Gilbert. And my thing is Gilbert's jiu-jitsu is so good. Jiu-jitsu is not wrestling. So if Gilbert can get him to the ground, that's scary for anybody. He just submitted, who was it, Neil Magny, like quick. And I mean, Neil's a very well-rounded fighter. I think Jorge's got to keep this on the feet. He's definitely a much better technical striker, and if he picks his shots right, he could really hurt Gilbert. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think Jorge is a little bit cleaner with the boxing, but Gilbert it's almost kind of similar to the Alex Izzy thing. I think Jorge's a more technical, volume type striker, and Gilbert is very powerful. He lands with some serious, as you saw with the Khamzat Chimaev fight. Khamzat walked through everybody like unscathed, and then he looked like he had been attacked by a pack of wolves after he fought Gilbert and got dropped in that fight. So Gilbert and that's the thing. I think he kind of makes up for not being a wrestler with those big shots because he can put you on the ground with his striking. And then once you're on the ground, I mean, man, he's a jiu-jitsu ace, ADCC competitor, medalist. I think he was a bronze medalist at ADCC, if I remember correctly. But he's a very, very good grappler. I think it's going to be a good fight. I do kind of give the slight edge to Gilbert, but I do kind of want to see that three-piece Minnesota get answered for and see that Masvidal versus Leon fight. I think that's the only thing that would prevent Colby from getting the next title shot, because it seems like Dana wants Covington to fight for the title. Since he showed up and made weight as the backup fighter and stuff like that, he's a pretty big name in the division. It seems like that's the direction they're going, unless Jorge pulls a rabbit out of his hat and is able to do something in this fight against Gilbert. The only downside I see to Jorge's game is, if you have to look back at his career in the beginning, and like when I say the beginning, I mean like literally fighting in Kimbo Slice's backyard. He took some big shots, was in some really rough fights, and he's been doing this a long time. And one thing we know about like accumulation in fighting, especially if you got your start bare knuckle brawling with Kimbo Slice, your chin probably is not there anymore. And then especially after that Kamaru Usman knockout, that was one of the most brutal straight power twos that I've ever seen landed in the UFC. So the question is, how many of the big shots from Gilbert is Jorge going to be able to take now that he's getting into that late 30s sort of part of his career, and as somebody who's been in a lot of fights and been in a lot of wars for that matter. So that's kind of the X factor for me. And that's why I'm leaning towards Gilbert, even though I'm kind of hoping that Masvidal pulls something out here. I think Gilbert probably is going to take this one.
I think so too. I think that, honestly, is what I think is going to happen. Well, in Dana's perfect world, I think that is what's going to happen. Is I think that Colby is a horrible matchup for Leon.
Yeah.
I just think that people can say what they want. Usman's wrestling, this and that, and I'm like, yeah, but Colby's cardio is second to none. His knees aren't blown. I think Usman's knees are where he's not the same Usman we saw 5-6 fights ago. I think that Colby does the same thing to Leon that he did to Jorge. And I think in Dana's perfect world, Jorge wins this fight. Leon loses to Covington, and then they have a rematch. I think that's what the UFC is kind of hoping on, because that's a huge pay-per-view event, regardless of what happened in their first fight.
Yeah, so you're thinking that Colby beats Leon, and then if Masvidal gets past Burns, they're gonna make that Masvidal versus Covington rematch. Yeah, that would be a huge fight. And then for Leon too, what I would do if I was Leon, and there's so many good people at 170. Who knows if Chimaev's going to come back down or if he's going to continue on at 85. But even if he doesn't, you have Rachmanov, you have Gilbert Burns coming back, you got Covington. Eventually, Leon's going to lose his belt at 170. And when he does, what I would do immediately, instead of trying to go fight for that belt again, I'm looking to make the three-piece in the soda match, because Jorge Masvidal is one of the few people that can headline a pay-per-view and it not be for a title. I mean, I think Nate Diaz is no longer with the organization, but Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, those are pretty much John Jones now, but that was for a title. But had it not been, it still would have been a pay-per-view headliner. But those are really the four fighters, in my estimation at least, that can headline a pay-per-view and have no title be on the line. So what I would do if I'm Leon is hope that you get the Masvidal win or Masvidal beats Burns so that you can get that fight instead of Covington, because I think that's a much better matchup for Leon. But if he doesn't, go on and fight Colby. And you know what? If you lose, Masvidal's waiting right there, and there's no better reason to make that fight than the three-piece in the soda, which happened. I mean, how many years ago was that now? I
think it was 2019.
It's been about, it was before the pandemic, I think. So Leon definitely deserves his chance. I mean, he got punched in the face after a fight by Masvidal. He deserves his chance to answer for that. So I think for Leon, it's some good fights either way. Even if he loses his belt, he's got that Jorge ace in the hole.
Yeah, I mean, Leon's not he's not a big seller. I don't know why. I like him. I like watching his fights. I think he's a very, very, very technical fighter. I think he's the guy now. But ultimately, I think that as hated as Colby's character is, that's the guy that I think the UFC needs a champion to bring in the money that they want. And like you said, I think it's a win-win really for Leon. He brings in money. If he's probably gonna make more money from that if he loses to Covington, he'll make more money from a fight with Masvidal than he would another title fight, like almost
Yeah.
guaranteed, just because
Yeah.
of pay-per-view.
Yeah, more than likely. And I got to give a shout out to my buddy on TikTok, the MMA Casual. He laid out this scenario. So this was me taking this scenario from him, but I think it's worth talking about. He thinks that what they're trying to do is put Covington versus Leon because they believe that's a favorable matchup for Covington. And I think they're probably right. This is the matchmaker's dream come true in this scenario. And then there's a reason that McGregor versus Chandler is happening at 170. And a lot of people, I think that's a very winnable fight for Conor. I don't think it's a guarantee, but I think it's a winnable fight. They're looking to make, in an ideal world, Conor McGregor versus Colby Covington for the belt after Covington beats Leon. Now, I don't think that's a good matchup for Conor by any stretch of the imagination, but that's a mega fight. I mean, just imagine the buildup for a Covington versus McGregor media tour. That's bad guy versus bad guy.
It would be so funny. And I honestly, I do think that McGregor gets past Chandler. I think that that is the best striker that Chandler's ever faced. He's been dropped every single fight. I think Conor could do that in the first round if he really takes it seriously. Conor by knockout in the first round for sure.
Yeah. And I think you're probably right. I don't know, maybe, because Chandler's so tough, he makes it a round or two, maybe second or third round knockout. But and I do believe that Michael Chandler has the skills to beat Conor, but much like Justin Gaethje, he's not using them. He's going to come in there and try to throw down and put on a banger and knock Conor out.
He should wipe the floor with Conor. He should wipe the floor with him. But
yeah, take him down, rinse and repeat, because one thing we know about Conor is his gas tank doesn't get any better as the fight progresses. And especially now with all this added muscle that he's got on, I expect his cardio to be even more diminished than it was in times past. But I think that if Chandler goes in there and tries to brawl with McGregor, he's shorter limbs, not as precise. Conor's going to find that left hand and it's going to be all she wrote. And I think that the UFC, if that's going to be at 170 and Colby gets past Leon and they do that, they end up making that fight, I could absolutely see a scenario where they're like, you know what? It's a bad matchup for Conor, but we're going to throw some big money at both of these guys. And I truly think Covington versus McGregor, if they could make that for the belt at 170,
might be one of the biggest,
would potentially be the biggest pay-per-view fight in UFC history. Maybe not eclipse the Conor Khabib, but pretty dang close to it.
Yeah, and I think that, Conor could win that fight. Here's the thing about Conor. Even the worst he's ever looked was against Poirier the second time. He just came out in that boxing stance. He looked really stiff. And even in that fight, he almost put Poirier's lights out.
Yeah.
I think it was a shot early in the second round that even like Dustin was like, dude, I was hurt. But then I don't think Conor looked bad at all in that third fight. Yeah, he was he got 10, beat 10-9 in that first round, but he came out in his karate stance. He looked healthy till he broke his leg, till he didn't, but he looked good. He was moving around. He had his karate stance back. He took some big shots, but he also landed a huge up kick on Dustin. He landed some big elbows on the ground. I just don't think he's as washed as people think. I don't think so at all. He came back looking better in the third fight. So,
yeah, I mean, he competed in the toughest weight class that the UFC has, which is 155, and that performance against Eddie Alvarez was one of the most perfect and masterful performances for a title that I've ever seen. That striking was just beautiful. And he's a very wealthy guy. He's got a lot of things going on in his life. He owns hotels and whiskey brands and now beer companies. And, the joke is a motivated McGregor beats, X, Y, and Z. But there's a little bit of truth to that. If Conor's motivated and he's really working hard and doing the things he's supposed to be doing, staying out of trouble, he's a force to be reckoned with. And Khabib was just the perfect stylistic matchup for him because he's not the best grappler.
Off of him for 4 rounds.
Yeah.
3.5, I guess. He defended that grappling almost perfectly until he couldn't. His gas tank, he truly looked good in that fight, but Khabib he's just better.
Yeah, that's just as simple as that. He's just the better fighter, but to be second best to Khabib at the time he was fighting, that's pretty dang good. Most people, Justin Gaethje didn't do nearly as good as Conor did. And a lot of people would have thought that stylistically, Justin would be able to fend off the grappling better than Conor, but that was not the case. So Conor does have some underrated grappling. John Kavanagh and those guys, they put some good camps and good strategies together. So I'm really excited for McGregor versus Chandler. And I think that's the Ultimate Fighter season should be fun, and leading into that fight it should be a blast. Like, I haven't been this excited to watch Tough in a long time. It's been years. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even watch the last season that closely. I paid attention to it a little bit, but I just that Connor is the icon of MMA. Will continue to be until he retires. He's just that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's the biggest name that the sport's ever seen, and that's provable by his pay-per-view numbers. And it's going to be a long time. I mean, who do you think would come up and challenge and maybe take him off of the? Not obviously, he's got like what three or four of the top 5 pay-per-views of all time. But you think Chimaev can get big enough to where he knocks one of those off the board? I mean, do you
Sean
see
O'Malley.
anybody? Sean O'Malley, you think?
If he can get a title, yeah, absolutely. Because he's one of the most liked guys ever, and he might be one of the best strikers we've ever seen. So if he can somehow, I mean, honestly, I think like I would have loved to see that Cheeto rematch. He's better than Cheeto. He might have lost that first fight until his nerve thing happened. I mean, he was beating up Cheeto. I mean, just like everybody else was. I think I don't like him versus Merab at all. I don't like him versus Cejudo. Don't like him versus Aljo. But if he can get the right matchup and get a title, absolutely.
Isn't that the thing, though? It's like 135 is just such a tough division to be in right now. Yeah. And honestly, Aljo, I'm a big Aljo fan. I think he's a good fighter. Merab Dvalishvili is the best 135er in the world right now, in my opinion. After what he did to Peter Yan, and I know they're friends, and I know they're not going to make that matchup, but ultimately the best thing that could happen for the division is Cejudo beats Aljo, and then you give Merab his chance at revenge to beat the guy that beat his training partner. And I mean, talk about the wrestling. Merab looked like the best wrestler in the UFC, but Henry Cejudo is a Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, and now he hasn't competed in a while, and he's getting a little bit up there in age, but I think that would be an awesome fight. 2 short, stocky guys with cardio for days, which kind of does make it tricky for Sean, because it doesn't matter whether it's Aljo, Cejudo, or Merab. Sean O'Malley has got a tough matchup with all 3 of them. Yeah, he'd have to just spark them and knock them out, relatively early in the fight, I think, in order to have a chance at winning.
His grappling still, he does have some really underrated grappling. It's just not on the same level as those guys. I mean, Tim Welch is an insane jiu-jitsu guy. Good wrestler. I mean, he was just never, I don't think, the athletic enough for his career, because he was a pretty good fighter in Bellator. I just think he kind of got beat by some of the guys that were a little bit more athletic than him. Sean O'Malley, and all standards, is probably one of the more athletic 135ers. He's just got to really unlock that. I mean, we really just don't know how. I guess in some of his jiu-jitsu matches, I think he did submit. What was his name? Takanori something. What was his name? He's a Pride fighter.
And I can't think of his last name.
Takanori Gomi, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
He did submit him pretty quickly. I mean, so he's athletic enough to do it. He's just got to really, really grapple. I mean, I don't think we've seen everything we're going to see from O'Malley yet. I don't think he's had to pull out all the tools. However, it's not a conversation. He's not a Merab. He's definitely not a Cejudo. And Aljo, even though his wrestling isn't as good as those guys, his submission skills are there. And I think he's probably a little bit stronger than both those guys. I think his cardio may not be up to Merab, but he might be a little bit stronger. For sure.
Yeah, possible. But 135 is so exciting right now, man. And speaking of 135, as 2 Houstonians, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Adrian Yanez versus Rob Font coming up on this 287 card as well. That's a really good fight. And I think that fight is going to be the closest thing that you're going to see to just a pure boxing match inside of the UFC's octagon. Both those guys have lightning fast hands, incredible gas tanks, a lot of volume. I'm super excited. I think Adrian can pull this one off. Rob Font's a really tough order, but I think Yanez could get the win here.
I think Yanez wins. I think he's going to spark Rob Font. I think he puts him to sleep probably in the 3rd round, maybe sometime in the 2nd. But I think he's going to knock Rob Font out. It's just, where does Adrian go from here? Because his matchups don't get any easier.
Yeah, I'm telling you, 135, man. It's like you really want to crack into that top 10, but then again, do you really want to crack into it? Because there's nothing but killers there. I mean, look at Yan. I mean, there was a point in time where Peter Yan, people were talking about, man, he's like one of the best champions the UFC has, and now he's won 25% of his last 4 fights or something like that. I think he's 1-3 or 1-4 in his last 4 or 5. He's struggling now, to say the least. And it wasn't that long ago that he was just a dominant champion. So 135 to me, I don't know about you personally, but to me, 135, it used to be 155, but I think 135 is the best division in the sport right now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think for sure. I think the thing about 155 is a lot of those guys are older now. All these guys at 135 are young killers. They're all like they're pretty much all fresh. You don't have that. I don't think you have a 40-year-old up there. You know, you have a couple of them that are right on that cusp of being in their late 30s and 155. You know, so yeah, 135 is probably the division right now.
Yeah, I think Sun Sao he was 40. He was the last one that I can recall that I've seen at that weight class that fought. And he retired after that loss against Davy Grant. But yeah, it's I mean, I guess the lighter weight classes, it's tough to be competitive when you're old. I guess the thing that goes first is the speed and then the power thereafter. And obviously is like some of the best grapplers can hit their primes in like their mid 30s to late 30s, because grappling is more about strength and control and stuff, whereas striking is a little bit more about cardio and speed and accuracy and stuff like that, more like the fast twitch stuff. And so that tends to be in favor of a younger fighter, whereas you can hit your prime. Like if for a boxer, for example, 25 to 30 is going to be your prime, whereas a grappler, it may be like 33 to 38 might be your prime. So it's like Gordon Ryan says that all the time. He's like, you know, I'm still not even 30 yet. I'm 5 years away from my grappling prime, which for somebody like him that's as good as he is and as dominant as he is, like if he hasn't hit his prime yet, I don't know what to think about where he's going to go.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, he could win a lot of fights in the UFC just off his grappling.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if him or any of those guys like Nicky Rod or any of the top level, you know, Gary Tonon's already in one championship and he's done pretty good. But I think some of the bigger guys like Gordon and Nicky and them could do decently well in MMA if they could work on their striking and
Get off the steroids.
Yeah, well, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be something that I don't know. I still feel like people are skating in the UFC with it. I just don't buy it. I see some of the people's bodies and I'm like, man, there's no way that guy's not on something or was on something yet recently.
Aljo, I mean, Michael Chandler, I mean, he's massive.
I mean, they're big guys. And so yeah, very, very interesting. But what do you think about you know, Dana came out and said that Khamzat's next fight will for sure be at 185 and it will for sure be against the top 3 fighter. And then if you look at like 185, you have Izzy at number 1, Robert Whittaker at number 2, and now Marvin Vettori at number 3 after that win against Dolidze. Well, that kind of leaves nobody but Robert, right? Because Izzy's got the date with Alex, and then you have Marvin, who's got he just fought, so he won't be fighting for a while, presumably, because that was a pretty competitive fight with Roman. And so I'm kind of thinking that the UFC all but told us that it's going to be Chimaev versus Whittaker. Now I know Costa just got a contract extension of 4 fights, and he said he's going to be making like $1 million a fight. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but who do you think they put Chimaev with? Do you think it's at 85 next, or do you think he comes back down to 70? And if it's at 85, do you think it's going to be Whittaker, or do you think it's going to be Costa?
I love a Whittaker or not a Whittaker. I love Apollo Costa Khamzat fight because I think that Costa's grappling is underrated. And Khamzat is really as skilled as he is, he's not going to be able to just ragdoll somebody that big.
Right.
It's not physically possible. Could he submit him? Yeah, but he's not going to just if he tries to fight him like he did Holland and just go 0 to 100 really quick, he's going to get really tired and he's going to get finished. I think Whittaker is so well rounded. I think he's a smaller guy for 185, probably even smaller. I would say a little bit smaller than Khamzat. I just think he's just so skilled. That'd be a really good fight. I don't know. I think that his striking is much better than Khamzat. Khamzat is a decent striker, but he's not on Whittaker's level. I could see Whittaker edging out a decision victory over Khamzat. But man, that Paulo Costa Khamzat fight would be a big pay-per-view, I think. Especially because Costa found his personality. He finally found himself, and I think it would just sell.
Yeah, that would be a big fight for sure. I think I would be a little bit more impressed with a win over Whittaker just because, as you said, he is so well-rounded, and he was the champ for a little while. He's literally beats everybody whose name is not Israel Adesanya. it's just one of those things where Izzy's kind of got his number. So if Khamzat could go up to 85 and immediately beat Robert Whittaker, I don't think many people would be arguing if he got a title shot thereafter. Costa, if he beat Costa, maybe they say, okay, well, we got to still put you against Rob or something like that. So I think a win over Whittaker solidifies Khamzat as the next title challenger. But a win over Whittaker, as you said, is easier said than done because he's so well-rounded. He's so good. So it's like both fights are challenging. I think the Costa fight is more challenging from just a pure size perspective. I think Khamzat's a better striker. I think he's a better grappler. I think he has a better gas tank. However, when you talk about somebody who is probably 40 pounds bigger than Khamzat just naturally, 30 to 40 pounds,
right?
That does, those disparities in skill start to be caught up with by just sheer size and strength. And so that would be very interesting because Costa hits with a lot of power. He's extremely strong, and Khamzat would be more technical in that aspect. But then you have Rob, who I think is equally as technical, probably more technical and better in striking, maybe not quite so much in the wrestling and the grappling, but he's done great anti-wrestling his entire career, and he's got really creative kicks. He's got a very difficult style to prepare for. So I think both matchups are very interesting for different reasons, but I think 185 should be where Khamzat is because he's just going to keep killing himself to go down to 170.
For sure.
And there's kind of a log jam there with, you don't know what's going to happen with Colby. You don't know what's going to happen with Jorge. The UFC is going to try to, both those guys are 35 plus. The UFC is going to try to squeeze every bit of juice they can out of those two guys before they retire. So I think 185 is the clearer path. And I think Alex Pereira, win or lose, is going up to 205 after this fight because he's just so big and the weight cut is so hard for him. I think he wanted to beat Izzy, and that's why he fights at 185. But I think truthfully, he would prefer to be at 205. And it was, two reasons. One was Izzy being at 185, and the other is Glover being the 205 champ when he entered the UFC, or when he was in the UFC kind of making his run. So now that Glover's out of the way, and if he beats Izzy again, I don't think there's anything left at 85 for Alex. So I see it being completely open, and I see him going up to 205 and trying to beat the winner of Jamal versus Yuri.
Yeah, I can see that 100%. Absolutely. And he could do it. He's got to put the weight on right for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, Yuri gets hit, and so does Jamal. Jamal hits like a freight train.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting fight too. I don't know. I think if you put Yuri, Jamal, and Alex in a round robin, they all beat each other. You know what I mean? And if you put them on in there against each other on any given night, one would beat the other. I think it's a weird stylistic situation at the top of 205, and I think Jamal is probably the least technical of all of them. But there's just something about Jamal Hill. He's a dog, and he can get in there and he can scrap, and he's got a hell of a lot of power. He's got a good chin. He showed against Glover that he's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of durability. So 205 is exciting as well right now. I think that it's going to shake out to be really elite strikers at the top of that.
Yeah, I think the thing with Yuri is, if you think about it, he really got outstruck by Glover. I just don't see Yuri beating Jamal Hill. I just don't. I think he's a good striker, but he gets hit too much. And I think Glover was winning that fight until he pulled guard. He doesn't pull guard. He wins that fight, which was mainly a striking fight. I think Yuri's, like you said, though, he's got the power where he could do it. He could do it against anybody. I just think Jamal Hill's gonna find a home for his right hand, and it's gonna be bad.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. If you would have asked me going into the Glover fight, if Jamal wins this, can he beat Yuri? I would have said absolutely not. But afterwards, I'm like, you know what? Like, Yuri gets hit and Jamal hits hard, and that's not a good combination for Yuri because he does kind of fight with his hands down, and you can't take too many shots from Jamal Hill. I don't care who you are, and he might not be the most technical guy in the world. He might still be, rough around the edges as far as sharpening his skills, but you know what? The performance and results say a lot, and he is able to get these knockouts and these wins against these really good fighters. And so I think there's a lot of momentum behind Jamal. By the way, side note, one of the best Instagrams in the game. He's funny, he's entertaining. Like I've become a big fan, and so I'm excited to see that fight with Yuri, and I think Alex should fight the winner of that for sure if he gets past Izzy.
For sure. I think that Jamal Hill is one of the funniest guys he's got one of the best personalities that we'll probably ever see. So definitely like it. Definitely down to see, anything that he's involved in. I just want to see it because it's awesome.
No doubt, man. No doubt. Well, listen, man, thanks for joining me. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about before we sign off?
No, I think that's pretty much it, man. We pretty much covered a little bit of everything. The main 3 fights on the card. So it was cool talking to you. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, let's do this more often, man. And we should go live sometime. Do like a fight companion type thing. We've got the studio here. You can come out to the house, or we can
For
do it
sure.
2 dimensionally like this. And it's fun, man. We're trying to build that live because that's the one aspect of our content right now that we're not doing a whole lot of is live stuff. So the more live we can do together, the better. And I think
Absolutely.
especially holding it down for H Town, as they say, the us Houston MMA guys, it's a small group of us, but a good group of us. So we gotta
For sure.
stick together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the community here for sure, man. It's a great group of people. I mean, I really found my home with Fury. I've tested out the waters with a couple of other of these, like maybe not regional so much, but some of these other smaller promotions. And it's not the same.
Yeah.
Shout out to Fury. Even Eric runs a great promotion there. Rich does a good job on the matchmaking, and it looks that much better on Houston MMA. And they're really continuing to carry on that legacy from what Mick was doing with Legacy.
Yep.
So it's awesome.
Cool, man. Well, listen, thanks so much for the conversation. And guys, if you haven't already, check out Combat Sports HQ on Instagram, Spotify, download the podcast, give them a 5-star review. This conversation will be on there. And until the next time, have a wonderful day. Thanks, man.
Absolutely.